Thank you very much for all your comments. I want to pick up one comment here from Karen G, who says, has it not occurred to you that it's actually the other way round? The Stormy Daniels nonsense is the actual distraction from Trump's mission to drain the political swamp and restore liberty to the American people and ultimately the world. The deep state are hell-bent on stopping him and are throwing everything at him. The problem is that the deep state doesn't exist. And the deep state is something that comes from Turkish media, and the Turkish word for that is derin devlet. And while there might be some argument for suggesting that there was some credibility of using the term deep state within a Turkish context, there is none in an American context. And it's rather explained by the fact that deep state and political swamp and draining the swamp are used in Trump's rhetoric as almost interchangeable concepts. You can't have a deep state that is also a political swamp. The two things aren't the same. They're different concepts. So one or the other is not a correct name. One or because things don't have two names like that. So I want to ask whether or not this so-called deep state really exists. The phrase sounds sinister. It conjures images of clandestine puppet masters pulling the strings of power. But it is in reality, I suggest, a fantasy rooted in paranoia, cynicism, and political opportunism. The term deep state, when Trump is using it, what he actually means is anybody who doesn't agree with him. That is the deep state today. That's different to what it originally meant. It first gained prominence in Turkey, where it described a shadowy network of military officials, intelligence operatives, and political elite who worked behind the scenes to preserve the secular republican system established by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. And the deep state allegedly carried out coups, assassinations, and other illicit activities to protect the status quo. In other contexts, similar terms have been applied to entrenched elites in countries like Egypt and Pakistan. And the concept migrated westward, finding a foothold in the US in the 2000s. And it was popularized partly by an academic called Peter Dale Scott, an investigative journalist who explored the growing power of America's intelligence agencies like the CIA and the FBI operating with limited oversight. And these legitimate concerns, where accountability was later hijacked by conspiracy theorists and eventually by Trump, leads to the designation the deep state. The deep state is about a failure in control. It's not about an organized cabal that is trying to that has a particular ambition. It's about failure. It describes failure. So if deep state exists at all, it's a designation of inadequacy. Not unlike the Home Office in the UK. The Home Office isn't trying to control everything. The Home Office can't control itself. And it hides behind this patina of power to disguise the fact that it is actually rather useless. And the same may be true of the CIA and the FBI. For Trump, the deep state has become a versatile scapegoat, and it has been given credibility and power simply because of his rhetoric. Faced with criticism, resistance, or leaks from within his own administration, he's repurposed the term as a cudgel against bureaucrats, intelligence officials, career civil servants, and the term has now become synonymous with anyone or anything that doesn't like Trump, be it whistleblowers, FBI investigators, public health experts during the COVID-19 pandemic. They're not working together. There is nothing in common with all these people, except they're not happy with Trump. That doesn't mean there's a conspiracy against Trump. That means there's a lot of people who aren't happy with Trump. That's a different thing entirely. And to call it a deep state is to imagine that there's some sort of plan to stop Trump. Well, that hasn't worked, has it? A New York Times investigation into Trump's initial COVID response revealed that his distrust of these deep state officials delaying life-saving measures was something that he was constantly harping on about. Instead of relying on experienced professionals, Trump fixated on conspiracy theories about bureaucrats sabotaging his presidency. That is a diversionary tactic, and that likely cost lives. Trump often conflates deep state with the swamp. And while the swamp metaphor refers to a corrupt nexus of lobbyists, contractors, and political insiders inside Washington, the deep state implies something darker, a shadow government actively undermining democracy. Well, okay, there you are. So you've got two unproven concepts, two unproven bodies that don't quite exist in the real world. Or to prove one impossible thing, this is nonsense. It's hypothetical. How many of these entities are we going to invent to describe Trump's frustration? And the irony, of course, is that the swamp undeniably exists. Washington teems with rent seekers, with contractors, with interest groups. But the deep state, as Trump defines it, is a work of fiction. It's a Hydra-like monolith that defies the basic reality of bureaucracy, where inefficiency and infighting reign supreme. The deep state narrative rests on the assumption of extraordinary competence among government officials, and that doesn't exist. It paints career bureaucrats and civil servants as hyper-disciplined conspirators capable of executing secretive master plans while simultaneously failing at routine tasks like processing paperwork efficiency. That doesn't exist. In truth, what Trump calls the deep state is simply the administrative state, a web of agencies and career professionals tasked with enforcing laws and policies passed by Congress, and their work often limits executive overreach. It's not part of a nefarious plot, but a check on unchecked power. Why then does Trump cling to this deep state fantasy? The answer lies in its utility. The deep state provides a convenient villain to explain away his failure. Couldn't build a wall? Blame it on the deep state. Mishandled COVID? Blame it on the deep state. The deep state sabotaged him. Faced impeachment? Of course it's the deep state plot. The narrative also galvanizes Trump's base, many of whom already distrust institutions. A 2018 poll revealed that nearly 40% of Americans believed in the existence of a deep state working against Trump. No such thing exists. Such rhetoric feeds the governance of grievance central to his political brand. And Trump's fixation on the deep state, it isn't just absurd, it's dangerous. It undermines trust in democratic institutions and emboldens fringe movements. On January the 6th, 2021, rioters stormed the Capitol, fueled by QAnon theories linked to the deep state, linked to election fraud and other imagined crimes. This paranoia erodes democracy by making compromise and dialogue impossible. After all, how do you negotiate with shadowy saboteurs that don't exist? In the end, it seems to me that the problem is Occam's razor. Entia nonsunt multiplicanda, praeter necessitatem. Don't keep inventing things because you can't explain something. To explain something that you don't understand or something that isn't believable, recognize that something is there that you don't understand or something is there that you don't believe. You can't simply attribute it to something that doesn't exist. And attributing it to one thing that doesn't exist, like a deep state, and then to a political swamp, and then to what? This is Occam's razor. Occam's razor is about the complex invention of imaginary solutions to explain something that actually is very simple. You don't know. And there are legitimate debates about the power of America's intelligence agency and the need for greater oversight. Historian David Roeder notes that institutions like the CIA, the FBI, certainly wield immense power and must be held accountable. But the deep state, as Trump describes it, is a conspiracy theory. It's a distraction from real policy discussions about transparency and governance, and ultimately the deep state is a euphemism for dissent. Trump weaponized the term to discredit experts, to delegitimize critics, to shift blame for his failures, and the danger lies not in the existence of an imaginary cabal, but in the cynicism this narrative fosters, a cynicism that erodes democracy itself. So, as we consider Trump's promises to demolish the deep state in a potential second term, let's remember, there's nothing deep about this rhetoric. It's shallow, self-serving. It's something that doesn't recognize the existence of Occam's razor. And much like Trump's legacy, it's a swamp of his own making.